Soldiers on the verge of collapse in the desert, and yet someone was rinsing off with clean water right in front of the general. The general could barely keep himself from lunging at it, but none of it was real. The soldiers' hands never touched a single drop. The whole thing was a performance staged for one purpose: to make the enemy believe they had water to spare. But the general refused to back down. He barked at the captain to lay down their weapons, hand over the water, and claimed it was the only way he would let them walk away alive. But the cracked lips and glazed eyes of the general had already given everything away. The captain knew his own men were barely holding on. Some of the soldiers were too weak to keep their rifles steady. He turned and walked away without a word, making a silent promise to himself that the enemy would pay for this. The Germans launched a far more ferocious assault not long after. This time they brought out mortars. Shells rained down on the unit's position without stopping. They moved to surround and wipe out the small squad entirely. What they hadn't counted on was how hard these 6 soldiers would fight, using the terrain to their advantage and leaning on the enemy's severe dehydration. After hours of brutal combat, the Germans, who had overwhelming numbers in their favor, were driven back in humiliation. The soldiers who had pushed themselves past the point of thirst lay scattered across the ground completely spent. But the 9-man unit was in just as desperate a position. Back-to-back battles had cost them 4 of their own, and to make things worse, their ammunition was nearly gone. Just as they were dreading the next fight, the Germans blinked first and came forward under a white flag again. But this time the curly-haired young soldier in the unit acted on his own. He strolled toward the enemy, whistling casually. The general tried once more to talk them into surrendering, but John had already made up his mind. He pulled out a knife and drove it into the general, then drew his gun and dropped another soldier in the same motion. But when he turned to fall back, hidden enemy soldiers opened fire. John was hit and went down right there. He didn't make it. That left only 4 men in the unit. After losing their general, the Germans came back with everything they had. Mortar rounds came in one after another, and took 2 more of the captain's men. The grief nearly broke him, but the Germans gave him no time to process any of it. With another wave of the enemy bearing down on them, the last 2 soldiers had already accepted they weren't going to survive this. They climbed onto the tank and opened fire into the German line. But as they looked out, they realized the German soldiers had their weapons raised, but not one of them was firing. That's when it became clear. Without their commander, the enemy had nothing left. They were surrendering in exchange for water. What none of them knew was that the well had been completely dry all along. The 2 soldiers were quietly savoring the irony when something happened that neither of them could have expected. Water came rushing up from the bottom of the well, clean and clear. The bombardment had cracked through to an underground source, while the enemy troops rushed over each other to drink. The 2 soldiers moved fast and stripped every last weapon from all of them. Just the 2 of them had taken over 100 enemy soldiers prisoner. Reinforcements arrived not long after, and the unit that had started as 9 soldiers had pulled off something that defied every expectation.